The trial of 5 men accused of killing soccer star Senzo Meyiwa continues in the High Court in Pretoria this morning, and we're going to take you there live, of course, where we have recently, as the week wrapped up last week, heard the defense pointing to possible cracks in how police store exhibits. Chriselda Lewis, our senior reporter, standing by to tell us more about what came out of that very big hot topic last week.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Naledi. So this past week, as you correctly pointed out, the conduct of police and how exhibits were stored came under sharp scrutiny. On Friday, the High Court here in Pretoria heard that the evidence bag, which contained the firearm allegedly confiscated from accused number 3, Thobeka Mhlahlo, in the Senzo Meyiwa Murder Trial, was unsealed when the ballistics expert had booked it out of police storage. This was back in 2020. So this is a startling revelation, Naledi, that was contained in a statement that was deposed by the ballistics expert, Colonel Chris Mangena, prompting the defense, Naledi, to suggest that the firearm could have been tampered with. Now, this affidavit, which was read out in court, this was during the cross-examination of the storage commander, Captain Bonginkosi Mjali. This statement was deposed in August 2020 by Mangena, who had booked out that firearm for further investigations. He says in that affidavit that he found the forensic bag was opened. The defense now says that firearm could have been exchanged on that basis. This gun in question was allegedly confiscated, you'd recall, from accused number 3, Thobeka Mhlahlo. This was back in 2015. He was arrested at the time for a different charge of unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition, and was later sentenced to 35 years imprisonment. Now, this is for a taxi violence murder linked to that gun. So what the defense is basically saying is that the period in which the gun had came into the possession of police, this is in 2015, and when Mangena had booked it out in 2020, that of course being 5 years, anything could have happened with that firearm. Advocate Zandile Mshorolo, you would recall, pressed further on the same issue, basically forcing a concession from the witness on the stand that while he understood that exhibit bags had to be sealed at all times, except of course for when they are sent to ballistics, there could have been discrepancies with how this particular exhibit, the gun itself, was handled. So based on Mangena's affidavit, that exhibit bag was open. Mjali says that Mangena must come to court basically to explain what he meant when he said that the bag was unsealed. He has insisted that the gun was in a secured bag. He went on to explain that the only time that a bag is unsealed is when an exhibit, is at the ballistics center and is sealed again inside a new bag. So we're expecting a new witness, possibly another police officer, to take the stand when proceedings get underway this morning. As I indicated as well late last week, was that what we're also expecting in the coming days possibly is that Thabo Musia, who you'd recall was one of the first police officers to have combed the scene in Vosloorus where Senzo Meyiwa was shot and killed, he will be called back to this court after discrepancies had been found in between what he had told this court and the pocketbook entries that he made. You would know that police officers, whenever they attend to a scene, they would then register in a pocketbook where they were at a certain time, when they arrived at the scene, what it is that they did, what did they collect, and when they left that particular scene. So the discrepancies that the defense says were found in between what he told this court as well as what is contained in the pocketbook is reason enough for Thabo Musia to be brought back to this particular court. But we're expecting this week more police officers to be called to this to come and testify, and certainly what we're expecting to see based on the trajectory of how the cross-examination by the defense has been going, that will certainly want to point to more cracks in how police had handled the crime scene and how these exhibits had been stored. So that's what we're expecting this morning, possibly another police officer to take the stand when we get underway at about 10 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, I mean, it's important, I suppose, really the role of the SAPS in investigating the story, and we will cross live, of course, when those proceedings do kick off just after 10 o'clock. But before I let you go, Chriselda, talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of the attendance of this trial. I mean, if there's one thing that certainly can be said is that Judge Ratamo Kwatling have been, a lot of the, I suppose, commentary has been that he's moving this case along quite fast. Are we seeing the Meyiwa family there? Any confidence from them in how things are playing out?
Well, the interest in this case, Naledi, is still quite huge. You know, it really hasn't decreased from what certainly I have seen, you know, over the past, since this trial, in fact, had restarted. The Meyiwa family has been in and out of court. There are instances when they are here, and there are instances when they are not here. But certainly what I've picked up is that they're also following the proceedings on the live feed on the SABC News YouTube page, which we set up on a daily basis. So when these proceedings are sitting inside court, remember, of course, while this has been a tragic incident that has taken place back in 2014, they also still have lives. Some of them are attending work, but they certainly want to see this particular case reach some kind of finality. We've certainly been moving at quite a fast pace this time around with the number of witnesses that have been called. You would remember that the Meyiwa family has long said that they want this matter to proceed with speed. They've waited for so long for some kind of justice in this particular matter. We saw that they were quite, happy with the fact that, you know, those that were inside the house at the time that Senzo Meyiwa was killed, you know, started testifying in this particular matter. You would recall that Tumelo Madlala, as well as Mtokozi Sitwala and Zandi Khumalo, are those that were inside the house who have so far been called in this matter to testify. We're still waiting to see. Recall that the state had indicated that it does not plan to call Kelly Khumalo, but once the state then wraps up its case, there's a huge likelihood that the defense, in fact, they've already indicated that they will bring an application to force Kelly Khumalo to be brought to this court to come and testify as one of the people that was inside the house at the time that Senzo Meyiwa was killed. Also questions about whether Longwe Twala will also be called in this matter. But what I do know for certain is that there's a huge likelihood that Themba Khumalo, he was not inside the house. Remember, he was the uncle to the Khumalos who police found at the house after Kelly Khumalo and the other occupants who were inside the house had taken Senzo Meyiwa to the hospital, and that's where he was declared dead in terms of the testimony that we've heard inside this court. So Themba Khumalo is likely to be called. He's the uncle to the Khumalo sisters. And we're also expecting him to talk about what happened at the scene, because what we know from the testimony that we've heard thus far is that after the occupants that were inside the house at the time that Senzo Meyiwa was killed, he was at the house. That is where police, who were the first responders to this crime scene, had got there and found him. And when they asked questions about what happened, from the testimony that we've heard, we understand that Themba Khumalo to have told police that Senzo Meyiwa had been shot, but those that have further details had taken him to the hospital. So we're also expecting, in addition to the testimony by further police officers, interesting testimony possibly from Themba Khumalo. When he will be called, we certainly cannot say at this particular stage, but there's a huge likelihood that he will be called.
Yeah.